spells don't want. Pollen's gotten to me. Hi, Bob.
Oh, hi everybody. How's it going down there?
Hot. It's
Oh,
going
yeah.
fine. When are you getting here?
Uh, what are we now? 20th, in about a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna let the nice spring weather go by and I'll wait till summer hits and then I'll come down.
It was 88 today.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was 31 here, which is in the high 80s yesterday, and it's going to be 17. It's going to be 60 something tomorrow. So it's all over the place.
You too.
All right. Anybody have anything under open session, public comment?
I don't see anything online.
Good. All right. General discussion, Maurice's Campground Annual Town Meeting update. Was everybody at the town meeting on Monday for that? So really, I don't need a update. I guess what I'm looking at is since the Maurice's Campground master plan was basically rejected, even though that is a non-binding issue. And it was 37 votes, which is not a major, it's still a majority vote. We'll see how the select board and Maurice's Campground kind of iron things out and where they go. But I just wanted to put it on the table for the planning board members now that we've made our voices heard a little bit louder, that we would like to be part of it, but not in control of it, certainly. If you've got any ideas as to what you might think we should be looking at or where you want to go, I think that is kind of where I was trying to get a sentiment of the board and things of that nature. Good evening, Robert. You'll hit it one way or the other. I already went by open session and public comment. I didn't know if you had any, because if you did, I'll gladly reopen it.
Why is
Okay.
he special?
He's always special.
Kind of like us, huh?
So at least I think we've got a new stepping off point with Maurice's. So I just want to get an idea from the board how they want to go, how they want to proceed. We still, even though we have a copy of the plan, we still haven't had any real meeting with them since January of 24. I'm sure they're going to have a discussion at some point sooner rather than later as to which direction they want to go. So, but yes,
Well, at the risk of insulting the Maurice's Campground Planning Committee, it seems to me they need to go back to the drawing board entirely. I mean, obviously the town, there's a number of meetings, but the general consensus of the people that didn't support the project was that there was too much density, and that they wanted more home ownership possibilities. My concerns is that they never considered from the start the other lots that the town owns and the possibility of trading that land or trading some other land to make a larger lot for a more effective project. And a second concern I have is it doesn't appear that they ever considered things like gear yards or a trade park that could help that missing middle that everybody always talking about move from affordable housing all the way through to being able to afford a house. Because another one of the concerns that everybody has is that the affordable housing will only really service the lowest income levels, and that middle income level where you make too much to qualify for affordable housing is far too large a breadth between qualifying for affordable housing all the way up to being able to afford your own home. And I think that one of the ways that we could help those people is by providing more commercial space for their businesses or businesses that they're employed at to be successful here in Wellfleet, so that they don't have to go to Eastham or Truro or beyond.
Right. I mean, if they even qualify for 30, 40, 50, 60% of market rate, and they're in a rental property, not ownership, and they've got a business and there's no ability to park trucks and work, then they've got to go out and rent something, which is costing money.
And to be clear, I'm not talking about the people that would be residents of the housing uh, projects. I'm speaking specifically about commercial space that the town would own or the developer would own and would lease to businesses who don't necessarily live at the housing project. So
Okay.
contractors, landscapers, shell fishermen. I mean, it's a pretty large capital expense to put in the appropriate facilities, and you need a lot of space to store all your shell fishing gear. And there's a lot of younger people that maybe have the access to a grant, but they don't really have a functional space to operate or to grow their grant to a point where it could pay for them to buy a house after years of hard work.
Good. I didn't catch that. Okay. Anyone else?
It would be nice if there was some regular communication, sit down face to face process, planning board and Maurice's committee. Whether it's every 3 months or whatever. But if there was something structured that we agree on, rather than hit or miss, and invitation or rejection of invitation system, I think that might be
Better communication
on a regular basis.
on a regular basis. Yes. So things don't really get totally out of hand, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Because I don't think one of us sitting in their audience and reporting back is the right way to go. I think it should be board to board.
I think with the town planner sitting in now, at least we have a line of communication, but I do feel that the two boards, Maurice's Campground and the planning board, it should be more members involved in front of each other. I agree with you. I mean, we all hear things a little bit differently. Sometimes I don't hear things at all. I'll admit. So I think that's a good idea. I think, more meetings in person, with as many as we can get to the meeting, on a realistic level. 3 months, that's 4 meetings a year. That's not outrageous, considering the size of this project and the problems with zoning and everything else. So I think that's a good input as well. You haven't heard, Beth, anything from Maurice's as to when their next meeting or where we're gonna go? Probably haven't met yet since town meeting.
I have not heard anything, no. And I keep checking the calendar and so I don't think there's anything scheduled currently as far as I can tell, but I can reach out to Carl Sussman,
Okay,
the chair, and ask when their next meeting is.
well, all right, then
Bob wants to say something.
hi, Bob.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Well, as you know, I'm a member of both. So since the town meeting, I haven't heard a thing from anybody on the Maurice's Planning Committee. So at this point, I haven't had an email, text, nothing. So I don't know what's happening with the committee. I haven't reached out to Gary Sussman. I'm just waiting for him to schedule another meeting. But I must say, this is quite unusual that it's been a week since town meeting, mostly, and I haven't heard anything from them. So as far as I know, nothing's been scheduled yet.
Well, I've said, and I think the other board members, all of us have said, we are not the enemy. The planning board's not the enemy to Maurice's campground. We're here to try and get the best project we can for the town of Wellfleet. What are your thoughts, planning board members, of since they haven't reached out to us, we reach out to them and said, listen, based on the town meeting vote, the planning board is open to a meeting with Maurice's campground to kick around the results of town meeting. Any thoughts on that?
I know I would appreciate the opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a joint meeting would be a good
Maybe
idea.
with a date.
Well, I think if I throw it out, if with your permission, if I throw it out to say, listen, we'd like to, based on the vote at town meeting floor, planning board would like to meet with you early on and see what you might be thinking as to the route you're going to take and what help can we be? And at least then they come back and say, okay, fine, we haven't met yet. If we don't get an answer, then we can take it from there. But at least they're realizing we're reaching out with an olive branch, so to speak. If that's
help
okay
them
with
craft-
everybody, I'll just get a letter out with Beth and
Yeah, but are we looking for a timeline? I mean, are we gonna let this letter go to September?
Yeah,
Christmas?
that's what I mean by
Yeah.
a date,
I mean, I think we should ask them,
in the month of July.
Sooner rather
Yeah.
than later.
I think ask them in June, and then if they say they can't make it for June, at least they'll tell us when they can.
okay.
No.
Bob?
Jerry, if I could, yeah. So
Absolutely.
our last meeting was supposed to be on May 12th, and it was going to be a face-to-face meeting. I think it was going to be held at where you guys are now. And it was canceled because of the upcoming town meeting and the votes on the warrants. It felt that we should postpone it, reschedule it to see what the outcome was going to be at the town meeting. So I think you really should reach out to them sooner than later, because assuming that because that meeting was postponed, when they do reschedule it, it will again be a face-to-face meeting. This would be a perfect time for you to have someone there. And since I joined the committee, which if you'll just bear with me, was in
About a year.
July last year. As far as I know, they had never had a face-to-face meeting. All their meetings were held on Zoom. So I don't know why they hadn't had one before. And it took a lot of effort on behalf of all the members to nail down a date to have an in-person meeting, which, as I said, was supposed to be May 12th. So I would agree with you that yes, reach out to them quickly so that when that next meeting is scheduled, that you're aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Then I'll meet with Beth and we'll get something out of ASAP. See if we can.
Yeah, I think a zoning overlay should be topic one for them, if that's what they're planning to do. We ought to be involved in crafting that.
I would like to see,
Yeah, go ahead.
if you're done.
I think at this point, well, and I haven't even thought about it, Bob, but I know they were working on it. I know they hired a consultant based on the 250 units. Based on what came back from town meeting, I'm wondering if their priority is still an overlay district, or whether it shouldn't be, where are we going with the number of units and massing and things of that nature before we dive into an overlay district, zoning bylaw. Because if they're, certainly don't want to put words in, but if they got the message that 250 is too much, if they got the message that the overall height and massing and everything else is out of proportion, and the traffic problems, then they've got to look at the scale of it first before they start diving into changing zoning. Because I often, and I haven't, I did see a little bit of what they've done on zoning changes, but when you change a zone that says no apartments, and then you're building 200 apartment units, and you're open to whatever the developer comes back at, and you don't want a special permit, and you can't do a 40B, then something in that overlay district is got to say either you're limited to the number of units or you have no cutoff. You can do as many as you want. I mean, to me, all they could do is an overlay district and say you can put apartments in. They couldn't put in the number unless it's,
They'd have to increase density over R2, which is what they're in.
well, any change, in other words, putting apartments in, normally speaking, and I'd have to check the bylaw, and I think I've got it down. Even if there is a district, and there are a couple of districts, you can build an apartment. It's limited to numbers. Certainly those numbers don't equate to 17 buildable acres and 200 apartments. So I don't know how they were even beginning to address those particular problems. Except to say, yeah, it's an open situation and they can build as many apartments as they choose to do so. I think those are some of the things that we as a planning board would like to know.
Yeah, and those are the things that the townspeople
Are complaining about, right? Is what's going on out there? What are we gonna see? Stop the guessing. If it's not a 40B, which apparently it is just not going to be, and then we know that zoning doesn't matter, then we've got to have a say in it, and is it going to be a special permit or not? If it's going to be by right, then you've got to have some parameters to work with it.
I have a bunch of questions.
I saw you doodling, so yes.
First of all, if we're sending a letter, do we come up with a month that we're going to put on it and see whether or not they respond and say they don't meet that month, but they meet the next month? I don't think we should send them a letter looking for a meeting without some type of a timetable. They can always tell us to go away, but we should be the ones asking to do it in a month. That way they're showing how urgent it is for us.
So the next 30 days?
If you want to say during June, I'm just saying, I think there needs to be a date in it, which they probably will blow off, but that's, at least we
Well,
know,
we can
we know where we fit then, Jerry.
Yep, okay, got it. This one.
I also believe that we've spent, excuse me, that the town is funded an overlay district already. Through,
Yes.
how do we get a hold of that? Is that something you can acquire for us? Is that something that's not public?
You mean,
We spent,
Beth can answer that, I think.
not to put you on the spot, but
That's okay. So just to make sure I understand what you're asking, it's how was the zoning consultant?
we paid a zoning consultant to do an overlay district. I
Correct.
believe that's been done, or they've been.
I think it's still in process, but
So I guess my question is, are we entitled to see where they're at in process?
I think we should be.
I mean, it is our money.
Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the money might have come from CPC, but for the zoning consultant, but I can find out for sure.
But my question is, if this thing is not on the rails it was on before, that should stop. And if whatever they've done, good, bad, or indifferent, we should look at so that maybe we have a better insight of their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
And yeah, and I think that would be an important part of the discussion, the joint meeting. That would be a primary goal.
Because the way I look at that is, even though the master plan or whatever plan we're working on, the overlay district is really going to define what they've thought they were going to do. Okay?
Correct. Yes.
So I think that would be very important if we could get, doesn't have to be complete, but whatever they've submitted for the board to anybody. I don't want to pick, you know what I'm saying?
They haven't submitted it to anybody. What they've got is an ongoing conversation with the consultant, and they've reached a particular point as to, I don't think it's finished. We could certainly in the letter ask for the current zoning overlay districts that have been prepared, the overlay district zoning bylaws that have been prepared.
I think my understanding thus far of what has transpired is that there were a number of surveys done with the Maurice's planning committee. And maybe Bob can enlighten us a little more, but and they answered questions, and I think my understanding is there's maybe a working draft of what the zoning overlay and use tables entail.
There is,
But I think it's a working draft.
yes, there is a working draft. I've seen it.
Mhm.
I think they brought it to the meeting that we had at the basement of town hall. Didn't really, I don't think, share it with us, but made us aware that they had in fact gone into 5.3, broken down apartments, broken down single families, broken down square footage, lot areas for the single families. So they had certainly in multi-units, multifamily. So there is definitely something in writing for changes on the current use tables that they have they've reached the point.
To Alfred's point, in this letter, perhaps what we do is request the most current iteration of that.
Yes.
And that the planning board can receive that prior to a joint meeting.
That would be fine. The other thing is if CPC paid for this, if we use the CPC's money go out in the block, or do they pay as they go? I mean, if we already lost the whole amount of money, have they taken the whole amount of money? I'd like to know where the funding level of this is too.
Again, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I will look into that and find out how it was funded.
I mean, I realize some of this isn't but if whatever you could do would be appreciated.
Absolutely, yep.
Because if we're spending money for a master plan, excuse me, if we're spending money for a zoning bylaw to copy a master plan that isn't finished, we might have the cart before the horse.
That's where I was going,
Um,
attempting to go.
I'm being polite. Two of the other things, which may or may not be part of this, is whether or not we've taken enough funding to where we're stuck with something. If we haven't, my question is whether or not, if the planning board would rather see single-family homes, duplexes, whatever, maybe we should look at drafting some type of a plan ourselves. I don't know where it go. With single ownership as part of it. And the reason I state that is we don't need too much money to do that, because even when the train was going full speed, they said this could be 5-10 years before it was completed. Okay. So if we build 5 houses, excuse me, if we sell 5 lots a year, the locals, and we keep it in our control, as we did down in Old Wharf, at that point, this might be a whole different project. And the reason we would need an overlay district for that is I would suggest going to half-acre lots, very few roads, because we could use driveways, decrease lot frontage down to almost nothing. We could figure that out, because we don't need 125 or 135 feet of frontage, because each time we create that road, sooner or later, we're going to use up a half a dozen bedrooms for the land area. So if we could do that, we may not get into the septic problem. And the other thing is, I agree with all that. At one point, somebody tried to put a tradesman park in on town property, and it hit the fan. They rounded up conservation, said part of it was in that because nobody wanted that at the sand pit, the old sand pit. I don't disagree with you. It's very difficult to find a piece of property to live on and then find a place where you can get a quarter or half an acre to store your shellfish thing. The house behind me is up for sale, and a lady had her shellfish stuff there, and they told her to get it out. She put it in my yard, didn't ask, left a note. She's got no place to go. I mean, and I felt bad for her, but after a year, I don't feel bad so more. But I do understand the need for that. So, I mean, I think some of these things should be in our direction forward. But I think that Maurice's, if they're willing to listen, a portion of it should slow down, be set up. And because we've done it before, basically we sell the land for short money. It gets the deed restrictions on it, so they can't sell it for $1 trillion. But that gives them the luxury of getting a mortgage, because now they have equity in the land. So it's basically a big step. And I don't know whether or not we want to do it for the $10 category, the $15 category, and we can do that so that some of them will have less restrictions on them. But as long as they all stay in the affordable that people make.
Well, if I could respond directly to a point that Alfred made, we have the seasonal communities legislation zoning hanging over our heads as a town. We have to pass those zoning laws, or the state will take away that designation. Am I understanding that correctly? The seasonal communities zoning requirements that the state is mandating, since Wellfleet has designated ourselves as a seasonal community, now we have to pass the zoning laws that legislation entails?
We do.
Yeah, so those zoning laws already drastically reduce setbacks and frontages. So might not even need that much of a zoning overlay. That's already coming down the pike. And that brings up another point. How much did the Maurice's Campground Planning Committee, how aware were they of these zoning law changes that were coming? Because this will help tremendously, or could potentially help with affordable housing in this town, through the zoning laws and through some of the other mechanisms in that legislation.
Good point. I mean, have we seen those zoning bylaws yet? In the seasonal?
Yes. I think a couple meetings ago, we had them as part of the package. We can redistribute them though. Chulani and I, can redistribute that to the planning board. But I think it was within the last couple months.
760 CMR, Executive Office, Housing and Livable Communities. I got it.
Bob
Answering
has
my
it.
own question. Hi, Bob.
Hi guys. No, I was just going to comment on your point about the progress with the zoning consultant. On our April 9th meeting, there was a lot of work done. We're continuing to hash out the fine details of the zoning overlay. The minutes of April 9th were approved at our Maurice's meeting of April 29th. And I just checked on the town's website, and those minutes of April 9th are not posted yet. But if you do read them and get hold of them, it'll give you a very good idea of where we are right now in terms of the progress and what's left to be done. I would say offhand, we're probably 75% complete with the final version of this overlay district. The second point is about the funding. The zoning consultant is funding through monies granted to the Maurice's committee by the town. And they're being paid as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
To sort of go along with what Alfred was saying before, if I may paraphrase you, let me know if I'm getting this wrong. We've paid for the town, that is, has paid for a bunch of consulting work from the zoning consultant. Is that basically what we want to know if any of that work might be useful for us or see what the progress has been made?
Through your chair?
Yes.
Yes, we are funding the overlay district.
Yeah.
The taxpayers are through some mechanism. It sounds like there's a checkbook for that and they're paying as they go. So we should know how much has been spent and what's left. The reason I am interested in it is to see what has actually been spent and how much we've got out of that, because whatever we have out of that is really going to show us where they were going. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. But just to continue along with that point, if there is useful information that the consultant has already, let's say, some work product that is already useful to the town, and I don't know what a zoning consultant does, I could only assume, and you would be the expert here, but I assume that they're combing over the town zoning bylaws and also maybe some state legislation or some state regulations, and maybe looking through some case law of some other towns that might have done overlays, and then sort of recommending to the town of Wellfleet what we could get away with. Would I be correct in that assumption?
I don't know exactly what she's doing in her research, but I would assume that she is coming over the town zoning bylaw for sure. That would be first and foremost. Hopefully looking at state. I don't know if she is looking at case law. So I don't know what she has used in her research.
What I mean to say is that, thank you very much. What I mean to say is that there might be some work product that is useful for the town. So it'd be great to see what they've done, what that consultant has produced so far. But also on a similar note, the town's paid for lots of water studies, whether it be wastewater, where the septic systems are going to be going, where the waters are going to be coming from. All of these, there's been lots of studies already. So there might be a lot of valuable information. There is a lot of valuable information already about Alfred brought up what we would do for the septics in the case of having singular ownership lots. A lot of that study might already have been done. So that's something to consider.
Well, if what limited information I have, without knowing a lot of it, is if they were entertaining bringing in the subdivisions to the right and to the left and the hotels into the septic sewage treatment plant, there would be no individual, most likely, even if you had a single family, those would not have individual septics. Those would be brought into the massive septic system. And that's one of the driving forces. The larger the system, I would again imagine, without the information, the larger the system, cheaper it gets because you spread it over X amount of people. So there are water studies. One of those studies is what the state had approved Eastham for when they went for town water. The state has mandated to them, for example, how many gallons they can take out of the ground when they did the system and in the future. And based on that, how much they can expand outside the town perimeters of Eastham into Wellfleet. So when I talked to someone who had looked at it on the water side, let's just say that the state had said over the next 20 years, you've got 100 million gallons that you can use up. And if you use 50 million gallons, 25 million gallons for the drive-in theater and 25 million gallons for the campground Parkingtons, and you use 50 million gallons for this 250 project, you have now Eastham maxed out your growth for water. So with what we're proposing and what we're asking for is potentially because I think they've already committed to Parkington and already committed to the drive-in certain amounts of water flow. So therefore, they've got to be very careful, because is that going to hinder their ability to do any more affordable housing or commercial? So those reports are there. It's a matter of somebody, and Helen Miranda Wilson's got a lot of the information, and I think other people do as well. I think the board, Maurice's Campground, should have that information, certainly. But we're all working off this same aquifer, and DEP is concerned, or whoever's water state level water management is looking at this way into the future. So I think in order for planning board as well to get a real good handle on what makes sense out there and how far do we want to go, Wellfleet has some serious problems with water. Lieutenant's Island, different places. We've either got to bite the bullet and get some town water in our own town, or say we need to limit Maurice's and take some of that and spread it down Route 6 to some of the hotels or different things of that nature, rather than spend it or use it all up in one place. So it's like the traffic. It goes, in my mind, it goes beyond just this project. It goes beyond the parameters of that 20 acres. How is Wellfleet looking at its future? What are we going to do? Eastham's taken some major steps, but at some point, I'm just going to use DEP, has stepped in and said, okay, this is how much water you can take, period. Unlike Truro continuing to throw water down the street to Provincetown, and Provincetown just does whatever they want with water and build out, build out, and build out. And Truro just continues to give it. So I think this whole complex, sewage, water, traffic, who are we taking care of, needs to be looked at from an overall picture. It's not just an isolated, and I think that's the way they've treated it in the past, as an isolated 17, and I say 17 acres because when you take the wetland out, you can't build on and everything else. If my memory serves me, we're down from the 21 or 20.5, we're down to somewhere around 17 acres. So when we talk about developing, when we talk about parking, when we talk about building, we're talking about 17 acres of land that this is going. We've already got into a situation across from the school with 95 Lawrence as to, whoa, we were told it's going to be able to go and take in a couple of the subdivisions on either side, Long Pond Road and Old Kings Highway, and we find out, no, we're now down to police station, fire station, and school. Let's get some facts straight. Let's get the information. So I think they've got a lot of information. I think we now need, if we're going to be involved to help, get some of this information so we can all make calculated, proper decisions. So let's see what we can get out of it. Do you have anything else you wanted, Alfred?
No, I think that. I don't think we can say anything till we actually get some paperwork.
Right.
Because other than that, I'm in the dark. There's no doubt about that.
When I just want to make sure, we did get a complaint from one of the members on the last letter that I had sent out that Beth and I had worked on. When we write this letter to Maurice's, do the members on the planning board want to see that before we send it out? I will gladly disperse it. And I think that's okay to do before we send it out.
Mhm.
Or do you want us to just prepare it and send it out? I'm open to whatever you want to do.
I'd like to look at it, just to make sure we
Okay.
cover everything that we've just discussed,
Okay,
If it's coming from the planning board,
Yeah.
coming from the planning board.
then we should see it.
Okay,
We could also all sign it.
all right, that's what we'll do.
Is there a way, would that require another meeting of ours? Or just,
No,
okay, we can
just
do this
email it
via
out.
email chain and,
What I was gonna say is, we can have, ask Chulani to email it out. But what I would request is that when you respond, don't do it in a group, do it individually, because otherwise we don't want to violate open
We
meeting.
send it to him.
Right,
Yeah,
To
you send it to them.
Giovanni.
right.
Just
To
for Giovanni.
Giovanni only.
Everything goes through the secretary.
Yes.
That way, we're not communicating, one's not talking to the other, open meeting law. Some are already being looked at, so I think we need to touch the bases, dot the i's, and cross the t's. Okay,
Would you prefer we had a motion and a vote on this, or is that not necessary?
I think that would be advisable.
I'm not saying that I don't believe the two of you. I just didn't know if it would cover you better.
I think it's a good idea to have a motion and vote.
fine with me. Since you said it,
Trying to see how I can make it vague enough so that you can, without being locked in, Jerry. Because sometimes when you're locked in, you miss the parts you really need.
But you guys are gonna see it anyway, so you're gonna be able to say.
I make a motion that our chair and our town planner create a letter to go to Maurice's and to come back so that we can I don't want to say actually authorize. We're not authorizing it. That's not in there. Just to come back to us for approval.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Unanimous. Okay,
That was a
we'll
poor.
get it out right away. Huh?
That was a poor motion on my behalf.
It worked. We got the point. We covered it. All right. I think that takes care of Maurice's. Do you have anything that I don't want to sit, if you don't want to sit here, you got anything you want to get to? Maurice's? Okay. That was, I think, of the crux, one of the points for the town meeting warrant article is that they had, when the Maurice's Campground Committee was appointed, they hired Studio G to do a master plan for Maurice's Campground. Studio G, from what I understand, and please Beth, jump in if I'm wrong. Studio G did a master plan. That's where the master plan included pictures of about 60% of their master plan of old houses in Wellfleet, 3 stories high, the Bradford, see you've already got apartments in town, so on and so forth. Back 150, 200 years ago, what the captains built. And they went down the road to say the master plan should have the maximum numbers you can get for affordable housing on that property. They never looked. And so when we started diving into it, and quite frankly, I will admit I was one of them that looked, and because I was having a problem with, just as you were, where did this come from? Where did I miss a master plan? Well, it turned out, yes, I did. I missed the master plan that Maurice's Campground had come up with. And I was thinking they were working on our local comprehensive plan that's been in existence, hasn't been updated for the past 10 years, but has been consistent since I came here in 1975 with the original planning board that did the 1966 zoning bylaws when the seashore came in. Keep Route 6 rural, keep the center of town, no additional commercial property to speak of on Route 6, keep the traffic situation under control, no South Wellfleets or this kind of thing. They didn't take that master plan into consideration. They created their own master plan for that 20-acre parcel. Studio G did it, sold it to them, said, if you do this zoning, you can get X amount of units. And that's what they worked on. Put the blinders on and went for Studio G made all good, I didn't never talk to Studio G. They did presentations, 3 presentations, and said they listened, but their mind was already made up. This is what Maurice's wanted. This is what we said you can do out there. It started with 300 units, down to 275, and then the neighbors complained and got down to about 250 and said, all right, we've compromised. That's the end of the conversation. Well, it turns out that master plan that Studio G did was not consistent with the local comprehensive plan that Wellfleet and the Wellfleet planning board has been working off of for years on end. So does that help you?
Yeah, to some degree, but always heard a lot of comments about we have to have to get to 10% of our occupied dwellings as a affordable housing program for the state stats that's suggesting. Well, a month ago, I did some research and the state says that we already have like 94. Okay. So
You're, I don't know the exact number, but you're correct. We already have some. Yes.
it pretty right
Yep.
off, but that was actually before Lawrence Road was approved. So with another 250 units, we will never have not, you know, a 10% ratio of occupied dwellings year round. Fall within that parameter, you know, I mean, we'll have more than enough, a century to cut, you know, probably down the road. I think, personally, my own view is, I think the town needs to have obtainable housing for people. Because as I've heard different boards talk, nothing against Lawrence Road, but a blue collar worker is not gonna be able to park a service truck at 1.25 parking spots. Okay. I think a good percentage of that should be obtainable housing. As someone suggested earlier tonight, half acre, quarter acre, fifth acre lot, something like that. So you can actually live in the town, and make it, and then you become a contributing member to the town as a property owner, and not just as a renter. I mean, I would think that Maurice's board would try to get input from all the other boards in this town to see what to do and not just rely on Studio G to tell you this is what you're gonna get.
They have, from what I can see, we've got other members certainly dive in. From what I can see, going to 2 out of 3 of those meetings, they say that they've listened to the general public, but those were relatively, I'm going to say, short meetings. When you have 250 people in a room, you can't hear all the complaints, and then you start cutting them. Like Danny, like town meeting was cutting a lot of those people off at 3, 4, 5 minutes. You can't explain what's going on in 3 or 4, 5 minutes. They seem to have felt, my take on it is, we were appointed to the board. We had Studio G do a report. And we voted that that's the direction we should go. And we've listened to the general public. We've got a real good sense of what they want. We're going forward, and don't take the rest of it into consideration. For example, one of the meetings I had with Carl is they initially were thinking about some additional restaurants, some studios, some small retail in that same complex, inviting the general public into it. And I had said to Carl, I said, no, I said, the local comprehensive is set against that we don't want any more commercial on Route 6. The last thing you're going to need is traffic problems there. And you don't bring the general public into a housing facility of that nature. It's like bringing the general public into a subdivision. Come on. You've got home occupation, which now we've realized that we need to work with, is that home occupation is now, under our present situation, all contained within the property itself, the house, the apartment. You can store some equipment outside, but you can't work outside. Well, what the heck does that do to the entire shellfish industry? What does that do to the fishermen? What does that do? You've seen it in the years you've been here. So I think we somehow went down a road that we need affordable housing. And the planning board has always taken the position that, at least while I've been on it, is since the state came out with this 10%, it's understood, just like was said at the ballot, this is not a bylaw. This is not a binding. The state is not saying any town or municipality in the state has to do 10%. It's suggested. We can probably count them on one hand, how many towns have given up the kind of land that Wellfleet's given up for National Seashore. We've done more for the community than any other town probably in municipality in the state of Massachusetts. We can't do what other towns can do. We can't do what Boston and Weymouth, who's got town water and town sewage. They didn't take that into consideration. So I think this is what we're kind of kicking around tonight is, wait a minute, we need police, fire. They work long days. We need people to work in town of Wellfleet. When they work at the end of the day, do they really need to drive all the way back to Dennis and Harwich because that's where they can find a place to live instead of staying in Wellfleet, being part of the community? So we need that workforce housing along with some rental housing, but you got to do it smartly. So I think it really, to answer your question directly, it just didn't follow the local comprehensive plan. It followed what Studio G put out there, and that's where the mistake was made.
I don't see where, we'll call it 225, 250 housing units, where even if they were all occupied.
Do you want to mic him?
Do year-round work.
Nobody can hear him online.
That's beyond us, but it's certainly a situation when you see, and I've brought this up and it probably will kick me in the backside, but when you see consistently Cumberland Farms in Eastham looking for help and you've got 100 units across the street and they still can't fill the jobs. Back in the day, our restaurants, our hotels and motels were all open year round. Now they're closed. Online has changed everything with people coming up to rent in the whole 9 yards. We just don't have the jobs available for that kind of numbers. And so it's a dilemma. But I think we just have to try and find some middle ground.
May I continue with that a little, Jerry?
Certainly.
I'll do it shortly. Studio G came to us for zoning stuff on our agenda one evening. They had a 2-hour presentation, approximately. We could not interrupt them. At the end, they were going to take questions. It went about 2 hours and 15 minutes. The lady took 2 questions and said, I have to leave. Maybe 3 questions. Studio G never had any interaction with the planning board. Even when they came, they basically gave us a presentation that we had no input into, questions for, or anything else. I also heard multiple times that Studio G went to all the businesses in this town. 3 of them, 3 people I know who have a business approximately the same size as mine, they still don't know who Studio G is as far as somebody asking them questions. So I'm going to leave it at the fact that I believe the planning board was never slated to be part of this, because that way people might have got answers in the beginning.
Jerry, I have a online user. I don't know if you're gonna allow to talk. Lauren?
Lauren.
Arcomano.
She's on the MCPC.
So the what?
She's on the Maurice's Campground Planning Committee.
Okay.
Hi, Jerry. I just wanted to say, when
Yes.
that gentleman was speaking in the beginning, I could not hear his question. I think I got the gist of it by your answer, but if he's speaking again, could you just please mic him? And I appreciate your discussions tonight, and particularly as we start meeting about the zoning overlay, I really hope this board can stay involved because I think it's critical. Thank you.
Lauren, the question, and I think I hopefully kind of answered it as you said. The question is, how did Maurice's Campground get to the number of 250? Where did the input come from? And that's why I was explaining that Studio G did the master plan, and it really was initiated with that master plan. And I said, and I've said publicly, and I said it again tonight, I had always thought every time that master plan reference was made, as they were looking at the local comprehensive or taking that into consideration, which it appears to me they didn't. So that's where the question came from. And hopefully that you listening to our discussion tonight, and when you see as a member and that letter comes before the Maurice's Campground Committee, that you can, and I'm certainly not telling you to do anything, but I think you've heard that we've over and over again said, we are not Maurice's Campground. We are not in control of Maurice's Campground Committee, but we're not the enemy either. We're trying to work in the best interest in the town of Wellfleet. And the more communication as a planning board has with, whether it's Maurice's Campground Committee, whether it's conservation, whether it's Board of Appeals, the better all of the individuals living in Wellfleet come out ahead. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate your interest and accountability, asking for accountability, because it's really, really important. So I do appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Home occupation. Anybody have a chance to look? Just general, have you got any questions on, and I'm sure you do, how we arrived at home occupation and some of the things apparently that those that were on it when we did it, missed, didn't see. I don't think I want to get into it totally tonight, but I think that if you've got some general questions on home occupation, so when we get to it, we can get to some more specifics. I'm hopeful we'll get some input.
I have a question.
Alec,
Fairly straightforward. This use chart that we got here, it's a printout of the zoning bylaws. The use charts, Central District, R1, R2, National Park, C1, C2. I see A, O, P, and PB, and I'm just curious what those mean.
it should be noted at the bottom of one of those pages.
Not either of my copies.
Okay. O is not permitted. A is permitted by special permit, and P is permitted use by right.
Sort of what I assumed. I was a little surprised but it was confusing because there was some of these categories that I couldn't imagine being omitted, let's say, for O, and that are. For example, contractor's yard,
Right.
not permitted in any of the districts.
Okay. That's a recent change. Contractor's yard was originally an allowed use And if you look to your book, you will see in the booklet, what you've got is what you gave out, Jelani put together is your use table. All right, so in your use, in the zoning bylaw, you will note when you get to certain areas when things would change. So contractor's yard. And this is as a new member, these are questions that you may seem like, how come doesn't seem to work? Well, okay, it may not work where you're thinking. Contractor's yard was a situation where if you were a contractor, no accessory dwelling, no principal dwelling, you could have a contractor's yard to run your business. That was only allowed in the commercial and the C2 district. And when the property next to VR's came in, which was zoned contractor's yard, and they came in and stripped it, and the neighbors who had a cottage colony 5 feet off the back line with the truck starting up, complained, and all the neighbors complained when all the trees came down. We looked at it and then looked at the C2 district and said, no, because we didn't look, we did look. And I will speak for myself, no other member on the board, missed the fact that a contractor would come into Wellfleet who wasn't a single contractor, was a finished carpenter, framer, plumber, electrician. They were going to come in, build a house, live there, and have their facilities at the property. That was where we were thinking contractor's yard. It wasn't a matter of somebody coming in like GMF, pure unadulterated 40-foot tractor trailers, loaders, the whole 9 yards. Even a cement plant or something of that nature. So all of a sudden, that's when we put the skids on. Most of the contractors, and I would say just like yourself or other contractors within the town of Wellfleet that do either 100% of their work being a contractor or 5% of their work being a handy person. The key is principal use. You live there, or you build a single primary building and you rent it out to one of the employees, and there's an accessory and you only use so much square footage in the size of the house. And it's sort of that workforce housing that we talked about before that Wellfleet's been known for. So that's the reason you're not seeing contractor's yard, because we're now looking at it and saying, okay, if you're a contractor, principal residence or a residence, accessory, your business is an accessory to the principal use, which is the residence.
So then, in effect, a contractor such as myself would be not qualified as having a contractor's yard, but having a service trade home business.
Exactly. Once you reach the situation where you had three or more
Two or more employees,
non-family,
non-family.
you reach another stage. Once you hit certain trucks size, you now have to move into a different zoning. So now it's been brought to the attention of the planning board that, okay, contractors do physically go out and assemble and work in their yard to take things to a job site. Plumbers will go out and work in their yard. Obviously, shellfishermen work 90% outside in their yard. So we have no pun intended, we've got a glaring problem with workforce in the town of Wellfleet that can't work on their property. That's me. So that's where all of this is going. So yeah, there are some areas where you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm a contractor and I can't go anywhere in the town of Wellfleet. Then you got to look at it and say, okay, do you fall under service trade, and what section of the service trade do you fall under?
Understood.
So in reading the other town home occupation materials, Truro, Eastham, and Provincetown, there are lots of similarities, but nobody uses the word entirely except Wellfleet. So
okay.
under the definition, it says a business activity conducted as an accessory use of a dwelling by a member of the resident family, either entirely within the dwelling or within an accessory building. So Wellfleet's the only one that uses that word entirely, which means you can't do anything outside.
So,
That's how it was interpreted. You can't do anything outside.
so in essence, reading it slowly and back to me, if on a simplicity level, if the word entirety is taken out of that definition, does that work? Does that potentially work? Yes, it allows them to work outside, but no, does it work for what we're thinking?
Well, taking out the word entirely helps. But the question then is, should it also include premises?
May I, through the
Sure.
chair? Looking at, I believe that was Turo's.
I like those the best.
No, this is East Ham's. Their home occupation is defined as an occupation or profession which is conducted in a residential zone and which A is carried on in a dwelling unit or in a building or other structure accessory to a dwelling unit, and is carried on by the member of the family residing in the dwelling unit for residential purposes, and is secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes. So by my reading of that, if somebody had a particularly ornery neighbor, they could that could be construed as being assuming that all of the work was being done inside of the dwelling. So I do think that including the language of on the premises is important because it specifically states that the work could be done outside. Then the problem lies.
East Hams.
That was East Hams.
Okay.
But as Beth suggested, including the term premises, I think would be very important for the home occupation definition, which then pushes the problem to the next step of, okay, what sort of externalities are going to be permittable? Because some of the language that we have, I believe it says no offensive effect to the home occupation shall be perceptible off premises, including but not limited to noise, vibration, smoke, dust, odor, heat, glare, fire hazard. I have electrical disturbance underlined because that's an interesting one, or interference with communication devices or other hazard or nuisance. And I think that electrical disturbance is an interesting one because it brings up the broader point, which depending on how fine your instruments are, you could detect an electrical disturbance from almost any electrical device. So any electrical device inside of the home being turned on can be perceived by a neighboring lot if you have a device that's strong enough. So that language needs to get cleaned up as well, specifically where it says no offensive effect needs to be some sort of.
And who interprets that?
Correct. There's no.
Justin, our building inspector, says there isn't a business in town that doesn't produce.
Right.
At least one of those things that you're not allowed to.
There's air conditioners on top of the marketplace. It's any number of things. So by the letter of this law, no business is to be done in Wellfleet.
Jerry, Bob also has his hand up. I don't know if he.
Bob? Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I also reviewed the four zoning documents. They're remarkably similar. There's really not a big difference between what they allow and what they don't allow. Churros I found to be very descriptive in terms of what they consider to be a home occupation. They have multiple lines describing exactly the type of occupation business, if you will, that they permit, which is a problem because then if you leave something out, it raises the issue, is this included also? Wellfleet is a little more complicated, I find, because it deals with this service trade. So we have three definitions of service trade business, service trade home business. I'm not sure we really need three definitions here. The other towns just have one, a service trade business. So perhaps some cleanup of this would be helpful, reduce confusion, in other words. The similarities I found, though, between all four documents was that they pretty much disallow any type of business, and they use almost the same wording that produces noise or odors or anything like that. So it eliminates doing anything in the business which would be outside the home, which would create noise or dust or disturbance discernible by a neighbor. And even if that was going on, let's say there was a garage and you had a planer in that garage and your garage door was closed and that planer was working. I think, Al, I think you're a woodworker. You probably know the sound that a planer generates. That could probably be heard, from a neighbor if you're in a tightly packed situation like, let's say, Maurice's. So I don't know that our bylaws are any major differences, but I do think the service trade and the service trade home business definitions should be looked at in terms of maybe making them more concise. And I did find one anomaly, which was interesting, in that in Wellfleet's zoning, the home occupation is allowed to occupy 25% of the premises floor area, but the service trade home business is allowed to occupy 30%. So I don't know if that's intentional or if perhaps we should be more consistent and just allow 1%. Other towns seem to be on 30%, but we have two separate floor areas for these home business and a home occupation. So anyways, that's my comments for now. Thanks.
I believe that those two different definitions, one of them may trigger a special permit.
It does.
So that's why they're different. One is by right, one is with a special permit, I believe. But anyways, I sat on the board that worked on all these things. We tried to clean up some of the stuff. We tried to take where the zoning enforcement officer was going at that point, because there were some conflicts. And I'll be honest with you, it never, ever either crossed my mind or came up about working outside, because there was no way that we would have supported this with all the work we put into it if we realized we were creating something, in my opinion, sitting on this board then, that would say you have to be in your house. There was no, I mean, we went to the point where we increased almost everything for the fishing industry. Why would you increase something if they can't work on it? I understand the building, the zoning enforcement part of this now, but I did not understand. I mean, I understand what it is, don't get me wrong, but I never looked at it from the point of view that we're going to allow somebody to put 200 cages with 1,000 envelopes in their yard and not be able to touch them. I mean, it's physically impossible to do all that on a tide. That's why people bring them home. That's why people put them in a pit. So, I mean, does that mean that the pit you put your oysters in, you're going to climb down in that and work on them in there? I don't think so. I don't think we made a mistake. We just never visioned that. I mean, what? And I can honestly believe the town meeting floor never considered that we're allowing the fishing industry the luxury of working in their own yard to say that they couldn't actually work. Other than that, all we should have done was create a storage facility. And some of the other stuff that's attached to it, unfortunately, ended up in the same category. But that was definitely not the intent, at least of me sitting on the board when we did this.
If I may, unless somebody else has something else to.
No, no,
Um,
okay, at this minute.
well, it is, you know, times change and the way that people expect to live and expect to operate as members of the community changes. So I could absolutely understand your oversight in that regard, but I mean, I don't think there's too much that needs fixing. It's a little bit of tweaking of a couple of particular items. So I don't think you don't have much to apologize for, is what I'm trying to say. So to speak specifically to what I've redlined, and since the home occupation and the service trade home business bylaws are so similar, I'll just refer to the home occupation. I do like Bob's idea that we come up with one definition, unless people can. Or maybe we should talk about what could be potentially a drawback about that. But to speak to the language that I believe needs to be corrected, section 235, 6.22, item B, number 1, says no more than 2 non-family members shall be employed in the home occupation. I'd like to discuss if we believe that 2 is too small. I mean, I'm not suggesting 5 or 10, but maybe 3 or 4. It is, since people are having smaller families, a lot more young people are depending on friends to be in business with them. So I can imagine a situation where 2 people who are not related have a business together, maybe hire a number of their other friends to work with them. They work well in the business, but none of them are related, and there's more than 4 people working. And so that would be illegal by this current bylaw. Item B, number 3, no offensive effect. I think we've already went over that. I think that's far too broad of a interpretation. So I'd like to see much more specific language regarding the externalities of the business. Item number 4, the floor area in use by the home occupation shall not exceed 25% of the total floor area of the principal and accessory buildings. I think a point that I believe Alfred brought up last meeting, we might want to look back at the definition of buildings and make sure pavilion is in there, because I think the current definition states an enclosed structure, but you can just as easily have a roof. But that being said, I don't know if 25% is enough. I can easily imagine a situation where a person has a relatively small lot with a relatively small house on it. And if you're considering 25% of that lot could easily be used up by a shell fisherman, for example.
5% refers to floor space in the house.
It does, but if we were going to expand it to the premises, then that would need to expand as well. And then similarly, item 6 is a similar issue. Exterior storage of home occupation related materials or equipment shall not exceed 30% of the lot area for aquaculture, shell fishing, or fishing home occupations, and shall not exceed 15% of the lot area for all other home occupations. I think we maybe want to revisit that number. Once again, it seems like smaller lots, even though the lot is smaller, the work that needs to be done on it stays the same size. The grant size, to use shell fishing as a particular example. the size of space required is more to do with the size of the grant than it does with the size of the lot. So I think that we could be more allowing in that regard. And I think that is all that I have redlined. Oh, and if I may, just briefly, some language that I did like from Truro, their definition of home occupation. I suppose I'll just read the whole thing because I don't know where to start here. Any business which has been by custom carried on by a resident of a dwelling unit with a limited number of non-resident employees, which does not change the residential character of the building. Home occupation shall include carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and similar tradesmen, home and yard maintenance providers. And this is the particular language I liked. The sale or production of on the premises, the sale of fish or shellfish, electronic repairs, services, telecommuting, internet-based services, nursery schools, furniture repair, refinishing, upholstering, dressmaking, home handcrafts, home cooking, bicycle repairs, real estate, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last sentence, home occupation shall not include the operation of a store of food service serving the passing public or the display or sale to the passing public of goods not grown or manufactured on the premises in the case of fish or shellfish. So basically what I liked about that language is that it would allow for people to hawk their wares to use a cliche, but then it does have specific language about displaying it and omitting certain certain items for sale.
Okay,
I have a question.
yeah, you, go ahead.
So the real question I have is home occupation of any flavor. Generic for discussion.
Mhm.
If it grows, we want the growth already figured into it so it doesn't have to go for a special permit. Is my question. You see what I'm saying? Because originally when we did this, we started off with a smaller number. If you did a good job and you became too big, we didn't want you to evaporate. That's when you had the luxury of the special permit. Granted, it's not a given. So my question is, are we trying to get to the larger one, which may be necessary in today's times, so that we would be doing away with the two categories, merging them maybe. And then that way we would get to the point where the whole category would be by right, even if we increased the number of employees, the parking space, whatever mechanism was in it.
I suppose I would like to see it through the chair. I suppose I would like to see something like that merging. I'm sure you had your considerations then, but now, and when, I mean, this 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Probably 15 maybe. I mean, but what we did was we listened to the public at that point with their concerns. And because people had at one point a storage pit or a reefer unit, you really weren't allowed to have. So, I mean, that's where some of the stuff came into play. And that's when the fence came in and the trees and the stuff, so you couldn't see the refrigeration unit. Because at that point, when the state regulations changed, some of the shell fishermen needed different things to comply. And basically by complying, they're against the home occupation.
Jerry?
Yes,
And that's a really good point because things change. And there are occupations that Truro lists that clearly came from someplace. But they're not an end all and be all because the world is changing all the time. And 15 years ago, some of these things didn't exist. And tomorrow, some things will exist that aren't included here. So there has to be some general allowance, not a specific list of what's permitted and what's not.
I would agree. I think the language that I was speaking of at the end of that definition, just because of food, really.
Oh, no,
Um,
no, but, or,
Yeah, like
food is its own
well,
category.
and I thought that there was some language. Well, there's certainly some language in about farm stands and locally grown produce, but I don't think people should be starting marketplaces in there in R1 or R2 districts. So that's um, but why I was asking how long ago those changes were made is because, time goes by and a lot of the commercial lots are, they're sucked up. Some of them are changing to residences and they're still zoned commercial. But it just seems to me that there's a very big problem with growing a business in Wellfleet. There's nowhere to do it. And there's other ways to address that. But looking at it from the home occupancy bylaw regulation perspective, these are some ways that I can imagine would help.
Okay. Normally, when we get into zoning bylaw changes like this, and this is exactly what's happened in this case, someone complains, goes to Board of Appeals. We think one way and Board of Appeals goes another way. That's not saying by any means the Board of Appeals is wrong. They don't make the bylaws, they enforce the bylaws. So all they can do is enforce the bylaw that's in front of them. Not a matter of whether they like the neighbor or don't like the neighbor and they shouldn't complain, it does not matter. It's before them, they have to work on the merits of it. This communication tonight is great, but I wasn't gonna get into it, but I think I gotta get into it at this point. And I'll let the board know I had an idea, and now I think I should run it by all of you first. We have a shellfish advisory committee. My son is in front of that board quite a bit. Sort of like his father, I guess, Maverick. Most everything we're discussing tonight is plumbers, electricians, something relatively simple in nature as a home occupation. When we cross, I'm just going to use it as a finding. When we cross the line into shellfishing, oystering, clamming, we then don't make a simple change to home occupation. We make a drastic change to home occupation. When we did over the years and years, home occupation, we were trying to allow, as Alfred said, those plumbers, electricians, doctors, lawyers, the ability to work out of their house. So that's one of the reasons why a home occupation is always attached, to your point where contractor yards came in, always attached to a main structure. So you can't have a home occupation without having a home. That's your primary residence. So when we think about home occupation, we think about, well, most of Wellfleet, when you run into these situations, is residential areas. Commercial is extremely limited on Route 6. C2 is extremely limited in the area and now restricted even further. So National Seashore has its own zoning bylaws practically. And most of the home occupation recipients can't afford to live in the seashore. So they're in the highly confined areas of what's left with Wellfleet. So what we're trying to do with home occupation is find a happy medium between those that work here in town, need areas to work, conduct a place where they can have their trucks and store equipment. Most everything is designed in such a way that the general public is excluded from home occupation areas. So as times changed, we find that you have a tennis court or whatever comes in and somebody wants to give a lesson or something, and the one car comes in or two car comes in, they play for an hour and they're gone. They can't do it because they're working outside, not inside. Well, are they really changing the environment? I don't think so. But because they don't meet the meaning of the law and it's not within the confines, there's a problem. Unique, but now we're hearing from plumbers, electricians, carpenters and saying, well, wait a minute, reality. Reality is, yes, I have a small construction business. Yes, I have a truck. I have a car. I have a trailer. They all fit in within most of it, home occupation, size-wise, axle-wise. General public doesn't come to my door. If they do, they're dropping off a check for a job and they're gone. I'm not conducting a business. Lawyer, doctor comes in, not a problem, one patient at a time. We now cross the line into a successful section of the individuals that work in Wellfleet in the shellfish industry. This brings in a new degree of problems. You either stay very small, you hit the grants, public grants, you have a commercial license, you go pick your oysters, you come home, call them, or you call them right on the grant or whatever, where you got them, send them off the market because you can't sell to the general public. It's over and done with. When you get in and you start moving up and becoming more successful, you now have more cages. You now have tumblers. You now have employees. You now have trucks going in and out. You now have odor, noise, different other items that are not simply putting some PVC piping in your yard if you're a plumber, or 2x10s, 2x12s, studs left over from a job site as a carpenter. You've now stepped in a new realm. if you're successful in any good degree in the oyster business, clams, you need help. And it's 1, 2, 3, might be a couple members that live with you, daughters, sons. But you need outside workers. They're coming to the job site. They go to the grant, they come to the job site, drop their vehicles off, and go to the grants, do the work, and come back. Now, they come back and go to with trucks, getting heavier and heavier all the time. They're coming back and forth with trailers that have 20, 30 footers for their cages and everything else as the equipment changes and gets refined. And that is a noisier situation that we also have to look into as home occupation. And you may look at it and say, well, okay, we can deal with it. Well, okay, we probably can. But there's a hook in this one. 3, 4 years ago, we had problems with neighbors complaining about abutters, neighbors complaining about shell fishermen. And I had to check on the state regulations as far as what constitutes a protected shell fisherman. Turns out the state definitions of areas that the shell fishermen work is the upland ownership of land only. Their grant didn't count and does not count as far as the state goes. So all of this is now coming into farming. If you have, and we passed a regulation that took farmers or shell fishermen and said that at town meeting, it was by petition and it passed, that if you have grants, those grants in Wellfleet are considered in your area as a farm protection. So in the past, to make it real simple, you had a 20,000 square foot lot, you had a grant for 1 acre, 2 acres, 20,000 square foot lot, and you had 2 acres of grant. You were not a farmer. You could work as a home occupation. Had to be careful how many employees you had, or you had to go for a special permit. Town meeting passed the petitioned article and said that all grants, all wetland that you work is now considered area towards farming. So now that individual that has 20,000 square feet, but has a 2 acre grant, now has 2.5 acres. They fall under the protection of the state of Massachusetts farming. Your noise, your smell, all goes by the wayside. You can put up and sell if you got the right license, and they can come to your door and you can sell to somebody if you're a farm. State does put restrictions on it. You can have as many employees as you want. The only thing a farm has to go by is your setbacks for any buildings and lot coverage. Most everything else, as far as zoning bylaws, go out the door. So now we've got a situation where we have a lot more farmers in the town of Wellfleet who have over 2 acres because of the acreage they have upland and lowland, that they can pretty much go around the home occupation aspect. So we've sort of got here a dilemma. So when you're thinking about all of this, and we'll certainly need to dive into this and get all of you on the same wavelength to make sure that what I'm saying is correct, because I'm sure you will. But as somebody that has a 5-acre farm, I've had to work through this. So when we're doing this, please keep in mind that especially on the shellfish industry, there's a lot that we're not going to be able to cover. Most of what we're going to be able to do is fall on the plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and that kind of thing. But in the past, our home occupation, when we did the bylaws, was trying to find, and I use this quite a bit, middle ground for property owners who own homes living with and around those that work in the town of Wellfleet. Have to make a living, need to make a living, need to work outside. We need both. So when we did this, as Alfred said, we missed blatantly entirely the word Beth used. Entirely. Seems like a simple word, but it really is consuming. You know, so I think that in writing this with the changes, we need to look at this and say, all right, we need to still continue to allow the home occupations to exist. Once they get successful, whether it's the number of vehicles, whether it's the number of employees, whether it's the time they operate, but there is a point, or how many vehicles they're running. Plumber runs two trucks, 2 drivers, not a problem. All of a sudden he hits 3 or 4. That's a business. Is that something that a particular neighbor in a residential area wants to see going in and out every single day, every single morning coming in and every single day going out? So I think this is the overall, when you're looking at home occupation, as to coexistence between those that work here, live here, and those that come and visit and own, not that own and visit. A harmony and a working ability that both can have some peace and quiet, but both have an X need that has to be satisfied. So that was the tiering before. We may need to clean that up. We may need to say, wait a minute, what's wrong with 1 or 2 people coming to the property? Short term, maybe hours need to be put in. We do already have that if it's necessary in a home occupation and a neighbor complains that that area that is the storage yard needs to be fenced in. That's not going to cut all the noise down. We all know that, but it's certainly going to help. So those, I think, when you're looking at this, it's not a easy fix. It's fixable. but it's an overall picture of what we have to deal with. Does that help you, or all of a sudden give you all a headache?
Oh, absolutely. I'd just like to add, just to your point about, and your specific example about the plumber, once he gets to 3 trucks, this is just one more reason why, not to bring up a previous agenda item, but why it would be very important for some sort of trade park at the Maurice's campground, because at this point, the businesses have a point at which they cannot grow anymore. Even if we clean up the service trade, home business bylaws, or the home occupation bylaws, there's still very much a ceiling at which people are able to grow businesses in Wellfleet if we're not expanding the commercial space for people to operate businesses out of.
Yes, and I agree. And I don't know. There is a caveat in the National Seashore bylaws. I don't think it's been tested by Wellfleet, that a municipality is excluded from the seashore oversight. Municipal uses are allowed use by right. I've wondered for a very long time, what really is the definition, according to the National Seashore, of a municipal use? So, for example, is a municipal use a piece of property the town of Wellfleet owns and some leases out to individuals that live there because it's a municipal advantage for the town of Wellfleet? I don't know. Is it a stretch to say that the town of Wellfleet is going to build a 50-unit apartment building in the National Seashore, and they're going to own it, and they're going to rent it out to municipal employees or whatever? Is that right? So I think we need some additional clarification as to, it wasn't a problem when the seashore came in 59 and 60. We weren't looking at that. We didn't have these kind of problems. But we've kind of been very quiet with the seashore, and I think we need to expand a little bit with the growth, with the limited growth we have available to us with freezing as much property as we did, which is phenomenal, which is absolutely phenomenal to have that protection. But are we missing something that the town of Wellfleet needs for municipal purposes that we're not using, and we own the land in the seashore to do it? Yes.
I don't want to extend this meeting any longer than it has to, but to that point directly, I alluded before to trading property with the seashore. I was alluding specifically to the Maurice's campground lot, but potentially that lot could also be used not just for trade, 1-to-1 for land, but if we were having some sort of negotiation with what the definition of municipal use is, and we had a particular case in mind, that could be used as a piece of leverage. And then secondly, to speak to the conversation that needs to be had with the seashore, that needs to be had sooner rather than later, because the forces of gentrification are bearing down on this town, and the seashore is a massively integral part to what our options are for fighting it. So I don't know if the seashore has a liaison or a particular staff member that deals with municipalities that have questions like this, if we'd be talking to somebody in Washington, or if that would be somebody here.
We'd be talking to somebody at a local level.
Right.
Start.
So maybe if we could, it might be prudent to begin some sort of dialogue, just spitballing, brainstorming with them about the potential issues that we see for the town, and then hear from them what the potential issues they might see from the seashore's standpoint might be.
Yes.
First of all, usually if we trade with the seashore, it's a 3-1.
They give us 3, we give them 1.
No. Okay. Second of all,
We do tend to come up short every time, don't we?
we've always got the, yeah. Second of all, the planning board, and I haven't had the time, and I'm gonna go do it this week. We were given $50,000 at town meeting for legal services,
Was it 50 or 40?
50.
Okay. For some reason I thought 40, but go ahead.
I'll agree with you, even if you're wrong.
It's 50 or 40.
Anyways, we have a sum. I think we've only spent 4,000 or 5,000 out of it. In order to get the title cleared and the access back to the landing strip in the seashore, which represents over 40 acres. So I mean, there is that piece of property, which we have never had a town administrator stay long enough. And unfortunately, Slade is gone. We had all the paperwork. But I believe we can hire them as a consultant through discussions I've had, if the town's willing to do that. That's one statement. I don't know why we haven't. I'm not saying to use that piece of property, but I imagine they trade that for one to get us out of the center of their property. I look at it as a strip mall. If I own the 2 right sides and the 2 left sides and you get the middle one, I'm going to give you more than it's worth to get rid of you. That's my opinion. The other,
The road to the beach, their parking lot.
not a road, Jerry.
Oh, the driveway over it is on town property.
That's correct. And because it's not a road, we don't have rights of interest in it. But Old County Road, which is about 65 feet to the west of it, there's a lot in there that was taken improperly, according to Slade, and at that point, some of our title lawyers, which would give us access to it because they did not have the right to close the road. The only reason the road was closed is because there was nobody else using it.
Old Kings Highway?
Goes through there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Old Kings Highway.
So at that point, the town meeting authorized to clean that up. But because town meeting is not a directive all the time, and we didn't have a town administrator who was willing to put the energy into it, I would say, it fell through the cracks. Supposedly the money was encumbered, but due to our unique bookkeeping skills we had for a few years, I don't know if it's still around, but if it was encumbered, it shouldn't have vanished. The only other thing that I disagree with Jerry on, not disagree, have a concern. Depending on the shellfish grants are very difficult to get. Okay. Sometimes they're easy. But if you can't get a grant big enough to be protected by the Farm Act, we should still be looking at that grant or the bylaw to make sure whether you are or you are not, you still have the same rights as the people who are protected by the Farm Act. I don't think that Jerry was trying to say we shouldn't do that. I just want to make sure that if I have an acre, and I happen to get one that has no area to expand, I'm stuck with that unless I move to a different place, which is not usual. So, I mean, that's why, that was part of this. And to say that the zoning needs to change 40 years ago, the only thing the average oysterman took home was a basket and his rake. There were no racks. There was no nothing. And if he had a pit, it was probably in the corner of his garage for stuff to sell in the wintertime because it wasn't the regulations that we have today. So I agree with all this. I'm just saying that we're doing this because of change. And that's why we need to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Home occupation will be on the next meeting. We're gonna meet once in June or more? Twice. We're usually like, I honestly can't remember. I think it's usually once.
It's once July and August.
Okay, we'll keep
Twice.
the 2 meetings in June.
I used to like you, Beth.
We never know without for doing. Let's see.
17th,
Yeah, you're way ahead of me.
just added 14 days to the 3rd.
As long as we get momentum and keep this going, that's great, but we don't want to make it. Then we're gonna also, you realize, we need to get something pretty close to where we're going to see what the public has for reaction.
Right,
Because that's gonna be we can do whatever we want until we get to them, and then they're gonna dictate what's gonna pass on town meeting. And I don't mean that we do what's best for the town, don't get me wrong, but I mean, all of our ideas to fix problems may not be what they want fixed. We've done well lately. I shouldn't say lately, in the past we did.
Yes.
I still can't believe that we missed it working outside. I mean, we talked about that so many times, those bylaws.
Hey,
I don't want to give a dissertation of the need and history of law, but if everybody has a similar understanding or the same understanding, homogeneous culture, these sorts of things, laws aren't really necessary, but the world is changing and everybody has a different interpretation. So for the same reason that you might have missed that is the same reason it needs to change, the same reason it needed to be instituted in the first place.
all right, so it is the 3rd and the 17th. I'll get that letter out, get you guys a copy as soon as possible and get it out to Maurice's as well. That's the next meeting on the 3rd, liaison correspondence minutes of May 6th. Any changes or deletions?
I'm moving as printed, but
Okay.
they're a
Second,
little long.
I'll second. Yeah, long.
Long. A little long.
There's a lot discussed.
You don't have to put it all in the minutes.
We didn't do them, did you? They're a little long.
I think he did a good job.
No, you did a good job.
all right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? With no changes. Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Seeing none. Unanimous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Derek, sorry, can you clarify who seconded?
I'm sorry?
Who seconded the move? Oh,
Yeah. All set? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Anyone opposed to adjourning? If you are. Thank you all.
did you learn anything, Bob?
Thanks, everybody. Take care
Thanks,
now.
Bob.